The night I came home early, the porch light was off. That was the first thing I noticed. We'd had that light on a timer since we moved in, every evening at 6:47, right when the Georgia sky started going purple at the edges. My husband set it up himself the first week we bought the house. He was proud of little things like that. Timers. Systems. Order. I used to think it meant he was dependable. The light was off, and music was coming from inside, something with bass and laughter. A lot of it. I'd driven 4 hours from Savannah because the conference ended a day early and I didn't want to sit alone in a hotel room, eating vending machine pretzels when my son was home. He still asked me to scratch his back before bed. I wasn't going to miss that for an empty room with blackout curtains. I didn't call ahead. I thought about it somewhere around Macon, figured I'd just surprise them both. Maybe stop for ice cream on the way. One of those small good decisions that ends up changing everything. I put my key in the lock and pushed the door open. The living room, our living room, the one I'd painted accessible beige over 3 weekends because I couldn't decide on a color and kept second-guessing myself, was full of people. My husband was on the couch with a beer in his hand, laughing at something on TV. My younger sister was in my chair. Her chair now, apparently, curled up with her legs tucked under her like she lived there. Her 2 kids were on the floor with juice boxes and a bag of chips, wrappers everywhere. The good throw pillows pushed off to the side. I stood in the doorway with my overnight bag still on my shoulder and just looked at all of it. My husband saw me first. His smile didn't fall exactly. It just went still. "You're back," he said. "Where's Eli?" I said. He glanced toward the hallway. In his room. He was tired. I didn't say anything else. I set my bag down by the door and walked down the hall. Eli's room was dark. Not nightlight dark, completely dark, door shut, no sound from inside. I pushed it open and stood there for a second, letting my eyes adjust. He was curled up in the middle of his bed, still in his clothes from that day, shoes still on. His stuffed rabbit was tucked under his arm, and his cheeks were dry, but his eyelashes were clumped together the way they get after he's cried and then fallen to sleep anyway. I sat on the edge of his bed and put my hand on his back. He stirred. "Mama?" "Yeah, baby. I'm here." He turned over and buried his face in my neck, and I held him there in the dark in his room, while my husband's laughter carried down the hall. I didn't sleep that night. My sister, I'll call her by what she's always been to me, which is the person who was supposed to be safe, had shown up 11 days earlier. I knew that part. My husband had told me she called asking if she could stay for a few days while her apartment situation got sorted out. I'd said okay, she was family. That's what you do. What I didn't know was that 11 days had turned into indefinite. What I didn't know was that she'd started keeping her food in our fridge, her toiletries in our bathroom, her kids' shoes lined up in our entryway like they belonged there. What I didn't know was that my husband had apparently decided the easiest version of life was the one where he stopped making Eli dinner and started making himself comfortable. I found out the extent of it over the next 2 days, the way you find out most things, slowly then all at once. Eli told me some of it, not because he was trying to get anyone in trouble. He was 5. He just told me things the way 5-year-olds do, in that matter-of-fact voice that doesn't know yet what's worth mentioning. He told me Daddy didn't make pasta anymore because Aunt was there and she didn't like pasta. He told me he'd been eating cereal for dinner. He told me that one night he woke up scared and knocked on the bedroom door, and Daddy told him to go back to bed because he and Aunt were watching something. He said it like it was just information. Just the way things were now. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower so he wouldn't hear me. I stood in there for a long time. The thing about being the responsible one your whole life is that people stop seeing it as something you do and start seeing it as something you are. A fact about you. Like your height. My sister had always been the one who needed help. I was the one who had a plan, a budget, health insurance. Our mother used to call me her sensible girl, and I used to think that was a compliment. I'd worked the same nursing job for 7 years. Night shifts, mostly, because the differential made a difference. We'd bought this house on the south side of Atlanta because I'd saved the down payment over 3 years, putting away a fixed amount every month, never touching it even when things got tight. My husband had a landscaping business that did fine in good years and required patience in bad ones. I didn't mind. I thought we were building something together. I checked our joint savings account on a Tuesday afternoon because I was moving money around for Eli's school year. New backpack, new shoes, maybe a week of summer camp at the Y he'd been asking about. The balance was wrong. I looked at it 3 times. The way you look at something that doesn't make sense, waiting for it to rearrange itself into something that does. Then I scrolled through the transaction history. There had been 9 transfers over 6 weeks, each one between $200 and $700, all going to an account I didn't recognize. I called my bank from the car so Eli wouldn't hear me. The account the money was going to had been opened 6 weeks ago. Joint account. My name was on it, which meant someone had opened it with my social security number. My husband was the other account holder. I sat in the parking lot of a Publix in 92-degree heat and did the math. $4,800. Gone. I didn't confront him that night. I know that's the part people find hardest to understand, but I'd learned something early in nursing. When you don't know the full picture, you don't act on half the information. You gather first, then you move. I called my best friend from college, who was now a paralegal in Buckhead. She gave me the name of a family attorney and made me promise to call before I did anything else. I called that afternoon. The attorney, a woman with a very steady voice, told me to stop using the joint account immediately, open a new individual account at a different bank, and document everything I could find before saying a word. I did all of that. It took me 4 days. During those 4 days, I kept showing up in the kitchen in the mornings and making coffee and watching my husband joke around with my sister while Eli sat at the counter eating toast. My sister had started doing my husband's laundry. I noticed that on day 2. She was folding his shirts on my couch while one of her kids drew on the corner of the wall behind the TV and the other one fed crackers to the dog we'd had since before Eli was born. I noticed everything. I just didn't show it. On the 5th day, I drove to my attorney's office on my lunch break and sat across from her desk and told her everything I'd found. The transfers, the account, the dates. I had screenshots of all of it, organized by date in a folder on my phone. She asked me if I had any documentation of my husband's income and assets. I did. I'd been gathering that too. She told me what I already suspected. What he had done with that account was financial fraud. Using my social security number without my knowledge to open a joint account and transfer marital funds into it was not a grey area. She said the word felony and the room got very quiet. I went home that night and gave Eli a bath and read him 2 books and sat with him until he fell asleep. Then I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water and stood at the sink looking out at the backyard, at the garden I'd put in last spring, the tomatoes going red on the vine. My husband came in behind me. "You seem off," he said. "Everything okay?" "Just tired," I said. He nodded, opened the fridge. "Got himself a beer. Your sister's thinking of staying through the end of August," he said. I told her that was fine. Give her time to get settled. I looked at my tomatoes. "Sure," I said. 2 days later, I asked my sister to take a walk with me. We went around the block, just the 2 of us, early in the morning before the heat set in. She was in a good mood. She talked about maybe enrolling her kids in the school down the street, about how the neighborhood was so much nicer than where she'd been living before, about how grateful she was that we'd opened our home to her. I let her talk. Then I said, "How long have you known about the account?" She stopped walking. The thing I'll say about my sister is that she's never been a good liar. She's always been better at omission, at finding the door out of a room before anyone notices she's left. She tried it then. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. I looked at her for a long time, long enough that she ran out of silence to hide behind. Then she said, "He told me he was setting money aside for when things got more stable." "More stable for who?" I said. She didn't answer. I turned around and walked back to the house. My attorney had advised me not to confront my husband directly until we had the legal documents ready. I'd already agreed to that, but I hadn't agreed to let my sister stay in my house one more night. I came back inside, went to the room where she'd been sleeping, and pulled her suitcase out of the closet. I set it in the middle of the floor. I didn't throw anything or raise my voice. I just went through the house, room by room, and collected everything that belonged to her and her kids. Shoes from the entryway, toiletries from the bathroom. The 3 drawings her older kid had made that were now on my refrigerator with my magnets. I put all of it by the front door. Then I went and got Eli. I told him we were going to spend a few days at Grandma's. My mother, who lived 40 minutes away in Marietta and who had never liked my husband to begin with. He asked if he could bring the rabbit. I said yes. He asked if we'd be back for his Lego set. I said of course. He accepted this with the easy trust that children have when they believe their mother has everything under control. I was trying very hard to be someone who had everything under control. My husband came home as I was loading Eli into the car. He stood on the porch with his keys in his hand, looking at the bags in my trunk, looking at my sister and her kids standing in the front yard with their things. "What is this?" he said. "I know about the account," I said. "My attorney knows about the account. You'll be hearing from her." He tried to talk. He started 3 sentences and didn't finish any of them. He said my name. He said we should go inside and talk about this. He said I was overreacting. He said he could explain. I buckled Eli in, got in the driver's seat, and backed out of the driveway. The next 2 months were not fast. I want to be honest about that. There's a version of this story where everything resolves cleanly and quickly, and I don't think that version is real or useful to anyone who might be going through something similar. What actually happened? My attorney filed a civil complaint related to the fraudulent account. Because my husband had opened an account using my personal identifying information without consent, the bank flagged it for investigation as well. He hired his own attorney. There were calls, counterclaims, meetings I had to sit through in rooms with fluorescent lighting. There was a moment, about 3 weeks in, where I cried in my car in the parking garage under my attorney's office building for 20 minutes before I could drive. But here is also what happened. The documentation I'd gathered meant I was prepared in a way he wasn't. My attorney was sharp and she had seen every version of this before. Eli and I stayed with my mother, who fed my son breakfast every morning and didn't ask me too many questions and quietly slipped me grocery money when she could tell I needed it. My sister didn't come to any of the proceedings. I haven't spoken to her since the morning I handed her her suitcase. She sent me a text once saying she hoped I was okay. I read it. I didn't respond. I'm still not sure what I would say. My husband, in the end, agreed to a settlement rather than continuing to contest. Our house went to me, my down payment, my mortgage payments, my name first on the deed. He got the truck and his equipment. The landscaping business was his. I didn't want any part of it. The transferred funds were repaid as part of the agreement, $4,800 plus interest. The fraud investigation through the bank resulted in a separate matter that I won't get into in detail, except to say that it did not resolve in his favor. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday in November, right around the time the Georgia weather finally remembers to be mild. I drove home from the courthouse alone, windows down, radio on, taking the long way just to take it. The sky was doing something beautiful, that late afternoon gold that only comes in November, and I sat with it for a moment before I let myself feel anything about the fact that it was over. I picked Eli up from my mother's at 5 o'clock. He ran to me at the front door and I caught him and held him for longer than he thought was necessary. He squirmed. I held on. We went home. He asked if we could have pasta for dinner. I said yes. We made it together, him standing on his step stool at the counter, stirring things very seriously, telling me about his day at school, about a boy named Marcus who could do a cartwheel and said he'd teach Eli next week. I stood there in my kitchen, mine, just mine, with my tomatoes on the windowsill because I'd pulled them from the garden before the first cold, and I listened to every word. There are things I know now that I wish I'd known earlier. Not because they would have changed anything, exactly, but because they would have made the fear feel less like drowning. I know that sensible is not a synonym for alone in this. I know that asking for help is not the same as losing. I know that the 4 years I spent trying to be low maintenance in a marriage where someone was quietly helping themselves to what was mine was not a personal failure. It was a pattern I hadn't yet learned to recognize. I know that Eli eating cereal for dinner while adults laughed in the next room was not something he will carry forever, because I got him out of it. I know that because he asked me last week if his new kindergarten teacher was nice like you, and I said I didn't know her yet, but we'd find out together. I went back to night shifts for a while, just to build the savings back up. My neighbor watches Eli on those nights. She has a son the same age, and they've become inseparable, those two. She told me once that she could hear us some evenings through the fence, me and Eli in the backyard, and that she always thought it sounded like a house that was doing fine. I thought about that for a long time. She was right. We were. I signed up for a financial literacy workshop at the Decatur Library because I wanted to understand things I'd let someone else handle for too long. The woman who ran it was maybe 60, sharp as anything, and she said something in the first session that I've turned over in my mind 100 times since. The goal isn't to never trust anyone. The goal is to always know what's yours. I know what's mine, Eli. This house. The garden. The life I built before and the one I'm building now, which is quieter and smaller and more completely my own than anything I've had before. My sister sent another text in December. I read that one too. I still haven't answered. Maybe I will someday. Or maybe some bridges are not meant to be rebuilt so much as understood, what they were made of, why they couldn't hold, and how to build better ones next time. Eli's rabbit is missing one ear now. He doesn't know how it happened. One day the ear was there, and then it wasn't, and he was sad about it for about 20 minutes, and then he decided the rabbit was cooler with one ear. He named him Toffee, and he sleeps with him every night. I think about that more than I probably should. He was sad. He decided it was okay. He gave it a new name. Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe that's actually all of it.